Good afternoon, everyone. I am Dr. Kathleen Walls, and I am here with wealth advisor, wealth therapist, the guy who you need to know if you want to know about some money and some wealth. Hello, Brian Brogran. How are you doing?
Dr. Kathy, it's a pleasure. How are you?
I am doing well. Thank you. I was just saying, I'm going to apologize to people because they just came to mow the lawn. So if
It
you hear
always
some
happens.
stuff,
That's what they
look,
call Murphy's
always.
Law. That's
Yes,
right.
yes. So we're going to keep working with it though.
That's great.
So, Brian, why don't you give them a little introduction into who you are?
Sure. Uh, I am a local Philadelphian, born and raised. Happy to be a sports fan in this town. We love our sports. And you and I are long-term friends from all the way back to grade school at Norwood Fontbonne Academy. And I have a real privilege to have an eclectic background of really blending psychology and economics and finance in an
Mm-hmm.
investment manner. And so today I really work with family businesses, family owners, and families of wealth, helping them, navigate and create a path of positive outcomes around their money issues. And that's what you and I have been talking about for the past few months is really and we'll talk about it today, continue the conversation around the taboo of
Yes.
money and the family dynamics. Both you and I have a very strong foundation in
You
clinical
know what?
psychology.
I'm here. I'm here. Sorry about that. I was
Yeah,
hearing
sure.
a lot of background noise, so I was trying to get it
Okay.
down. So go ahead, keep going.
Yeah. And so, we're just, spreading the good news, if you will, and
Mm-hmm.
increasing the level of awareness around the taboo around money.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I look
absolutely.
like, look, this conversation got me sweating. I'm like, boy, I got a super glisten going on. Sorry, y'all.
That's okay. You're shining.
Look, okay, shine bright like a diamond.
That's
So,
great.
yes, this is such an important topic. And so one of the things is the flyer, as people will see. Hello, Leslie Young. She says hi to both of us.
Hello,
So,
hello.
and hello to others who are joining us. Um, we started out naming this topic money, power, respect because it it is that when we're talking about governance and we're talking about family office, right? We're looking at who has the money, where is the money, who has the power, who has perceived power, who has
That's
real
right.
power, right? And how
Yep.
does respect play into all of this? You have some thoughts about that before we jump in?
Yeah, I mean, I think you covered it right there. It's a broad tent, and it's really the nuances, as you and I know, that really are the gems where the secrets are hidden.
Mm-hmm.
My mother, who was a therapist, and really gave me a really solid foundation and kind of just the perspective of the human condition. She used to say very simply, "You're only as sick as your secrets."
Mm.
And
All
I'm
right,
telling,
y'all know to have a pen and piece of paper. And if you don't know to have a pen and piece of paper when you're on a show with me, you now know.
yeah.
So that's one to definitely get down. Say it again. You're only as sick as what?
Your secrets.
You got it. Go ahead.
And please forgive me for referencing my mother, but she was such a instrumental part in my life, and
Hmm.
I keep her alive every day by referencing the good work that she did.
That's right.
Uh,
No ever
yeah,
apologies for
yeah,
referencing your mother. Your mother had a
absolutely,
whole bunch of gems, and thank goodness she passed them on to you. So now you're
absolutely.
able to pass them on to us. So we don't accept that apology.
Well,
Okay.
thank you. And,
You're
and really,
welcome.
I mean, and that's why you and I do this work. It's a vocation. It really is.
Hmm.
It is. There's a certain level of stewardship
Hmm.
that not only do we have ourselves to carry the torch and pass on this good information, but
Yes.
to spread that and really implement that into the families,
Hmm.
so they do not run into the challenges that we always talk about: more money, more
Hmm.
problems,
Come
right?
on. Yep.
And so, we're going to talk about wealth. We're going to talk about the term rich. We're going to talk about all these things
Mm.
today. And really, what is a family office? When should a family business start thinking about a family office?
Mhm.
Who are the trusted advisors?
Come on.
Um, I just had breakfast with a gentleman who I knew through St. Joe's University
Mhm.
that he lost one of his parents,
Mm.
and he was a partner in his family business.
Mhm.
And so this gentleman is grieving, So
Mm-hmm.
what type of advice does he have right now, and who
Yeah.
does he turn to?
Yeah.
So I was able to give him some poignant information as to who to keep close, who to look after, watch
Yes.
out for, the classic thing, don't make any bold decisions in the first 12 months after a major loss or if you're in bereavement.
Say it
So again,
again.
it's a broad tent,
Yeah.
okay? And it's the nuances, it's the
Mm-hmm.
minutia that
Mm-hmm.
is really that makes a difference. I often think about a big ship, right? Like a cruise ship. And just 1 degree of change in direction over a day, 2 days a week is a full circle,
Yeah.
right? And so
Um,
that's what we're talking about. How do we work with families, and who should you work with?
Mm-hmm.
And what should you look for in an
Mm-hmm.
advisor to help you with those minute degrees of change in direction so
Yeah.
that eventually in the long run you have a positive outcome.
Yeah. So let's look at this real quick. You mentioned working with an advisor, and I know we talked about this. I want to say it was like the first show. The being aware that financial advisors exist.
Yeah.
That's something that wasn't always accessible to
Hmm.
all communities. It
Hmm.
was not thought about, and
Hmm.
so right, you do end up with terms like being rich versus being wealthy, and what are
Hmm.
those differences. So one, let's talk about the discrepancy of the awareness of financial advisors,
Yep.
the history around it,
Yep.
and then let's also start looking at wealth versus being rich.
That's great. Put a flag on that because
Yep.
I'll give you a little history of kind of a refresh of how we ended up here.
Yeah.
Just real short, because I love my history. So please make sure I don't talk too long.
All
You
right.
know, it's really, we're talking about this trusted advisor, what they now call kind of the holistic advisor.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And really, it birthed out of family office advisors and really being able to handle many different facets of investments, administration, tax, and governance and qualitative issues. So it's a real holistic. And
Mm-hmm.
um, if your advisor doesn't, most advisors are kind of siloed in a
Mm-hmm.
specialization, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not generalized. And so I read this great book by Harry Dent back in the day, year 2000. He
Mm-hmm.
wrote The Roaring 2000s, and he also talked about demographics. And he talked about the generalized, specific, and specialized generalist. And
Mm-hmm.
so I really took heed of that, and it was really about being a generalist, but having the expertise in those silos so
Mm-hmm.
that when you do go 30,000 feet above and take a global perspective,
Mm-hmm.
you can make recommendations and you still have the expertise of the individual's sub specializations.
Yeah.
So, a refresh of this, a little history is that I started back in 1999 in DeSalle Towers at Morgan Stanley Dean Witter up in New York City, going through their training program, which was incredible. It was a 3-week program,
Mm-hmm.
immersion, if you will, learning about everything from tax to estate planning to REITs to UITs, a unit investment trust, to stocks. We didn't have ETFs back then, but we
Mm-hmm.
had margin and all that. So it was really the same program my dad went through back in 1967 in San
Mm-hmm.
Francisco
Mm-hmm.
through Dean Witter. And I had just finished my master's degree in clinical psychology with specialty in addictions with the family. So blending psychology with money seemed very natural to me
Mm-hmm.
because there's heuristics, there's
Mhm.
resistance, there's
Mhm.
denial,
Mhm.
there's all these psychological mechanisms that we face
Yep.
as human beings. We all face them. You and I face
Mhm.
them on a daily basis. We face them
Yep.
with our kids, with our loved ones, with our
Mhm.
partners,
Mhm.
right? So if you fast forward to like 2008, Scott Budge, the late Scott Budge, did a great job. He wrote a book called The New Financial Advisor.
Mhm.
And these were strategies for successful, wealthy families and their management, really introducing concepts around positive outcomes and creating a roadmap between qualitative and quantitative.
Mhm.
Now, real quick, what does that mean? Qualitative is really the soft skills,
Yeah.
the emotional part, dealing with family legacy, that communication, that family cohesion, togetherness, honesty,
Yes.
all the soft trust, all these soft skills, and
Mhm.
then blending that with the technical skills of how do you set up a trust? What's life
Mhm.
insurance?
Mhm.
What type of investments? What's the risk management of those
Mhm.
investments?
Mhm.
So I give Scott, wherever you are, I give you credit. You were a pioneer in the industry, and of course today, you fast forward, And the OGs, even before Scott, were, James Groman, Dennis Jaffe,
Mm-hmm.
in this space, and they just delivered a great book called Wealth 3.0 with Kristen Keffler.
Mm-hmm.
And again, they've been carrying the torch for many years. So people
Mm-hmm.
in my ilk of the subspecialty in this kind of trusted advisor space really turn to them as, again, that true north.
Yeah.
But we all bring different skill sets, and it's a big tent. So
Yeah.
we want more people. But I had to say that this movement of assisting advisors to gain these skill sets, to go from specialization to global, if you
Mm-hmm.
will, and their awareness around the qualitative approach still has a lot more to go. But we're on the right
Mm-hmm.
path, and we're cooking with Crisco. Um, the validation of behavioral finance, as I've talked about before, I think did a
Mm-hmm.
great job for us.
Mm-hmm.
And now we get to blend that with financial therapy.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you and I know that people don't like the word therapy. I don't know why.
This-
I love therapy. I love talking things out,
yes.
just the way I'm conditioned, and so are
And
you.
discovering
And
things.
discovering,
And
yeah,
I think just a quick aside is sometimes people are concerned that something's going to be discovered that they don't like about themselves, and they
right,
won't have a chance to work on it in
yeah.
private before it's known in public.
I heard
And
this on social media. Your personal growth is in direct relation to how much capacity you have to
mhm,
have a sober look
mm,
at yourself,
mhm,
right? And to be able to
mhm.
have be able to handle constructive criticism of
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah.
So there is capacity of kind of being able to be, as you know, coachable,
Yep.
all right, and being
Yep.
open,
Yep.
right? And so
Yep.
this goes back to what you and I love about sports performance and high
Mhm.
performing individuals and leadership. There has to be a level of coachability. There has to be a
Yes.
level of openness
Yes.
so the magic can happen, if you
Yeah.
will, of
Yeah.
growth and that
Yes.
aha moment.
Real talk.
Yeah.
And fun fact story for people, as Brian mentioned, we played sports growing up. There were some people on the boys team who I was asked to assist to help being a better athlete.
That's right.
So that coachability, right? That
Yeah.
openness and that willingness to say, just because someone's here to help me doesn't mean I'm horrible at it, right?
Hmm.
I just need to, and that I can't get better at it. It just means that they have more knowledge than I have right now and are helping me get on track.
Well, if my memory serves me correct, I think you were the all-star on the women's team.
Yes, I was.
The hoopy hoop. Okay. Absolutely. I think I rode the bench. There's the only sport I think I did ride the bench, and I loved it because I just loved making the team. By the way, Norwood Final Pond Academy, 32-0.
Come on.
Okay,
Come on.
1986
That's right. Dust
champions.
off the trophy.
Can't beat that. But
That's
to
right.
your point, I remember going to my good friend Elliot and
Hmm.
asking him one weekend, "Listen, can you teach me how to dribble and do a layup?"
Yeah.
Like, how much
Yeah.
humility did
That's
that
right.
take
A
to
lot.
somebody who was an all-star in soccer,
That's right.
right? But
That's right.
I wanted the three sports trophy. I was trying
That's
to get
right.
that
You,
sucker, you know, the three triathlete, right? I didn't
yes.
say scholar athlete. I said the
That's
three.
right.
You were the scholar athlete.
Right. So it's interesting though, as you're saying that, right? We're looking at, right, there's the quantitative, as you mentioned, and the qualitative. And
That's
when
right.
we talk about the research part of it, the qualitative are the stories, as Brian mentioned, right? They're the soft skills. But we also have to look at, I mentioned stories because we have to look at the family
Yep.
stories,
Yep.
right? What stories are being passed down and embedded into people's psyche about wealth
Mhm.
and about being rich and
Mhm.
about being prosperous, right?
Mhm.
What do we think this means, being successful? And how do we quantify the story? How do we look at the data, which is the which is the quantity, which is the part that says this equals this, and
Yes.
therefore we then tell this story.
Yeah.
So, Brian, let's talk a little bit about the difference between wealth and being rich.
Yeah. Sure. And then we can pivot into entitlement, which really kind of speaks to
Yes.
this topic.
And let me say
Um,
this real quick
yeah.
before you jump into that. So, this whole idea of how to work with a family office advisor becomes very important because we are now taking, as we used to watch on television, I'm going to date myself here, things like Dallas,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
There were, what was it, Knots Landing,
Mm-hmm.
Dynasty, the first
Yep.
one, not the current one,
Yep.
right? So we're a Hotel, like
Yep.
all of these types of shows, which showed family wealth. It also showed richness, which you'll talk about,
Yep.
and but it also showed generational wealth
That's
because
right.
it was a story that ran within the family and got passed down. In our real life, we could probably look at the Hiltons
Mm-hmm.
as such a
Sure.
story.
Sure. There's many
Um,
of them.
right. So
Yep.
working with a family office advisor, it's now understanding, and Brian, please correct me if I'm off here. It's shifting your perspective of family, or adding, let me say adding instead of shifting, adding to your perspective of family and recognizing the family as a business structure.
Absolutely.
And so, the same way you need office managers, you have different levels, supervisors, and so forth. A family office advisor is going to take that holistic view of the family
That's right.
and then provide instruction to get you to your goals in current life, as well as the goals that you have beyond.
Very well said. And really, the issue that we're hitting right now is a level of supply of
Mm-hmm.
true fiduciary practitioners like yourself and myself.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I'm the only CMT charter market technician with a master's in psychology. The last I checked, that was a couple of years ago. But
Mm-hmm.
the point is that we need more chartered financial analysts, more
Mm-hmm.
CFPs, chartered financial planners.
Mm-hmm.
We need more of these professional designations to blend in that psychological financial therapy, and that's
Mm-hmm.
happening. Kansas State is has a great program that is really just cranking out the new advisor, in my
Okay.
opinion,
Okay.
around financial therapy, which is great. But
Mm-hmm.
let's talk about rich and wealth,
Yeah.
and kind of what traditionally we would see. So I grew up in Chestnut Hill, and I remember
Mm-hmm.
being at Wawa and having a gentleman next to me who pulled up in a 30-year-old Volvo station wagon
Mm-hmm.
wearing docksiders, very unassuming, but he had generational wealth,
Mm-hmm.
right? But
Mm-hmm.
you wouldn't know it to see him, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or the way he carried himself and the way he treated people with respect
Mm-hmm.
and care.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but today that's a little bit different. People
Yeah.
like to flaunt their wealth. I mean, we
Yeah.
have social media like Instagram where it's like, hey, if I'm living my best life, what are you
Yes.
doing? Right.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so it becomes very kind of weaponized to a certain extent.
Mm. That's
Um,
interesting.
yeah, and that
Mm-hmm.
that's a stream of consciousness right there, which is
Yeah.
and so that's why these having true fiduciary practitioners with this holistic to really help
Yes.
address entitlement. So let's just get into it real quick.
Mm-hmm.
My broad experience as a trusted advisor working with family businesses, business owners, and families of wealth really has given me a bird's eye view of this concept of privilege, right?
Yeah.
And some in family businesses kind of confuse that with nepotism.
Mm.
And in my opinion, they're different, but they are related. Okay.
Mhm, mhm,
And it's very, very interesting, this idea about privilege, because what I'm finding, Dr. Kathy, and it's been my experience, is that advisors are
mhm,
not equipped to address the issue of entitlement because
mm,
they feel like it puts them at a disadvantage. It feels like it puts them on rocky, unstable footing with their
mm,
client,
mhm,
and it's almost seen as a risk.
mhm,
I'm talking about the
mhm.
big banks.
What?
I'm talking about the
Why?
big trust
Why
companies.
though? What do you
They
think?
feel that they're not trained to have
Mhm,
what I call compassionate confrontation.
mhm, mhm.
And I've seen your work and I've seen
Yeah,
your dynamic. You
yeah,
have no problem with that
yeah.
because we're based in very clinical psychoanalytical background, which is
Mhm,
about transference and countertransference.
mhm,
And
mhm.
by the way, you can't get that on Zoom.
Right.
Okay, you really can't. It can't get that energy and feeling. So
Mhm,
most of my work is in person. There's a
mhm,
lot of coaching and upper level coaching that you can do around leadership
mhm,
and Zoom. And Zoom's great,
mhm.
but to that point, so privilege is really seen as a taboo.
Yeah,
Still, where
yeah,
money was a taboo, we're
yeah,
addressing that.
yeah,
Advisors are finding trouble with the idea of privilege, and
yeah.
I'm telling you, privilege is the number one complaint. How is my child going to
Mhm,
be able to handle this amount of wealth and still
mm,
be a balanced and have well-being
mm.
in their lives and have fulfillment? How
Yeah,
does the money not ruin their perspective or
yeah.
motivation? That's the key.
Mm,
How does this wealth diminish the motivation
Yeah.
of that stick-to-itness or
Yeah.
resilience or
Yeah.
grit, as Angela Duckworth
Mhm.
and Martin Seligman talked about in
Yeah.
positive psychology.
Yeah.
So privilege is taboo in the wealth community, and you and I have talked about money taboos.
Yeah.
Well, it's almost like the third rail. They don't want
Yeah.
to touch it.
Yeah.
But there's a paradox to privilege.
Yes.
Okay, just like there's a paradox to success.
Mhm.
Privilege is a really precious concept.
Mhm.
Okay, it needs to be handled with care.
Mhm.
Okay, and respect.
Yeah.
Um, because privilege can really become a form of cancer that
Mhm.
eats the family from inside out.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay. And the reason why advisors don't want to touch it is because they have to, most of the time, had to address the level of entitlement with
Yeah.
the wealth creators.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or if they're second, it becomes even more difficult and more complex if they're second or third generation where they've been indoctrinated into a trust.
Yes.
Which is there's nothing wrong with that.
That's
But
right.
it's really that's why you and I always talk about going through the values exercises,
Mhm.
going through the family narrative like you just talked about,
Yep.
finding what I call the secret sauce or the gems of the
Yes.
family and highlighting those in
Yes.
such a way that privilege is a gift
Yes.
and a blessing.
Yes.
And when you have that different
Mm.
shift of perspective, that privilege is a responsibility.
Mhm.
Okay?
Now that's a big one right there, right? Because you're
Yep,
asking people to be accountable
there you
for
go.
their actions.
Yep.
You're asking them to be responsible. And so there's a growth piece there, and back to this idea of vulnerability and
Mm,
willingness to explore. My phrase is take honest inventory
yeah.
of, right, where are you undeveloped and where are you underdeveloped.
Mhm.
And by working with a family office advisor, this is someone who will be able to point out those areas to you, and not say, some people can identify them themselves, like they're listening to this conversation now and they're like, oh yeah, I definitely need some growth space in there. But sometimes you have blind spots. I mean, as great as I am as taking self inventory, there's some things about myself that I can't see, and so I have to have someone trusted that I can turn to and say, hey, take a look at this. Hey, what do
Yep,
you think? Hey, what am I missing? And
yep.
so, for a family who's interested in creating generational wealth and well being,
Mhm.
you definitely need some additional help in place. I'm going to close
Excellent.
this window because they're coming on this side. I'll be
No
right back.
worries.
Go ahead and talk.
Yeah. So there's a concept that Dr. Kathy and I have talked about quite extensively, actually, is around sports psychology, which is pressure is a privilege, right? So when you talk about wealth and about privilege of wealth, that is also pressure on an inheritor, the next generation. So that pressure needs to be honored and needs to be respected. But I'm here to tell you, I vote for the word privilege because a lot of people in the industry are using words like positive abundance or negative abundance, and I think it
Mm,
just clouds the issue.
mhm.
It really doesn't do service to the end individual and family to really getting there where they need to go in the quickest way fashion.
Yeah.
Um, so back to family office services, family wealth services, they all fall under governance. And
Mhm.
governance again is a very opaque word. At the end of the day, does that mean that it just slows you down? Like the governor on a U-Haul truck won't let you go more than 55 miles an hour, as I experienced back in my grad school days when I was moving across country.
And Brian, let me
Um,
say this real quick
yeah,
before we go deeper into
sure.
governance. This idea of privilege. So,
Yeah,
a large amount of my work is around diversity, equity, inclusion,
yes,
inclusive excellence,
yeah,
accessibility, right? It's about taking others into consideration and what people may not be seeing and or recognizing.
yeah,
Now, within that, obviously the P word, and that's usually how I refer to it, which is privilege,
yeah,
comes up.
yeah,
And it gets weaponized,
yeah.
right?
Absolutely,
And it
absolutely.
doesn't get thoroughly explored. And then you have people shunning privilege. I'm not privileged. My background is dot, 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 dot.
Yeah,
And I try to take the weapon out of it when working with people to explain that we all have privilege,
yes,
right? It
Absolutely.
shows up in different ways.
That's right.
Now, when we have, as you're talking about, entitlement, a right to something by definition, that's different. And
Yeah.
if we then shift it to recognizing that the privileges that we do have is a blessing
Yeah.
and not blocking other people
Yeah.
from
I love that because I mean, at the end of the day, it's really about access to opportunity versus outcome. You know,
correct.
I
It's
mean,
that
that's really where
access
it should.
piece.
Yeah, that's
Come
really
on.
where the conversation should be.
Yeah.
And this is America, aren't we? Aren't 4th of July is tomorrow? Aren't we
Sure
all
is.
striving for the pursuit of happiness to level up and to let our kids have a better life than we had?
Mhm.
That's the pursuit of privilege,
Exactly.
is it not?
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's not a bad word. It's not a bad word.
Right.
It's how we honor it. It's how we take, to your point, responsibility and owning it.
Yeah.
And then how do we handle with care, if you
That's
will?
right.
So
And
I
me
love that.
having privilege doesn't take away your privilege,
No,
right?
no, no.
And
And
that's that weaponized piece. When I use my privilege to prevent you from doing something, that's not
well,
okay.
it really it bleeds over to spirituality.
Mm.
Let's just say it,
Come on, call it.
because it has to do, and this is the work that we do with families, because
Mhm.
money's energy, money's spiritual. It's a spiritual energy.
Mhm.
It's heat units, it's calories at the end of the day.
Mm.
Um,
Calories. Now you're talking
yeah,
my language. Come on, y'all. Let's eat up. Come
that's
on.
it.
Go ahead.
So that abundance, right? But you can have what? You can gorge yourself, right?
Mm.
That's a sin, right?
Mm. Mm.
To be
Gluttony.
gluttony, absolutely. So
Mhm.
envy and jealousy
Mhm.
are related to privilege.
Right. Right.
Wow.
Right. Hadn't thought about it. Just made me
Have
think
we,
about
yeah.
coveting
I've read
also.
a lot about privilege, and have I heard that before? No,
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
there's a difference between envy and jealousy,
Yeah.
right? It's
Yeah.
part of the 10 commandments. You shouldn't covet with your
That's
eyes, your
right.
neighbor's goods. That means don't be
Mhm.
jealous. You should actually say, "Hey, that's great. You got a Porsche.
Right.
I hope I get a Porsche too."
That's right.
I mean,
That's
it should
right.
be an Oprah moment, and you get
Yes.
a Porsche, and
That's
you get a
right.
Porsche, and you get a Porsche. I mean, isn't that what we want? So
You
let's
yes.
get out of our own way. Let's get out of our own way,
Yeah.
and let's find a true north.
You
And I
know, when
think,
you
yeah,
go ahead, I'm sorry.
and I think that's what governance is really about: is
Yeah.
creating a north, a true north.
Yeah, talk about it. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I mean, it's funny because family offices and all this, they have a purpose, right?
Mhm.
The reason why you have governance and family office services and a trusted advisor is so families don't have a insuperable wealth, right? And
Mm.
that's the word of the day. I came into
Mhm.
my email today, and
Yes.
it's a perfect fit. Insuperable
Spell
means
it for us.
INSUPERABLE. Okay,
Mm.
and
Okay.
so it means something that's impossible to gain control of,
Mhm.
impossible to solve, impossible to overcome.
Mm.
Well, governance, family governance, is just the opposite. It's created within the family
Mhm.
structure and wealth structure, so you do have control. You do
Mhm.
have a pathway for resolution and conflict
Mhm.
resolution. You do have a vision that will lead you to a positive outcome for the family, and more
Mhm.
importantly, the individual within the family and their quest for well-being and
Yeah.
mental health and spiritual health
Yeah.
and financial health, right? And
Yeah.
so you and I have always talked about this. My vocation in life, as I know it today, is one. You and I are both teachers, and
Yeah.
we're shaman to a
Yeah.
certain extent.
Yeah.
But it's really helping people become financial adults and
Yeah.
emotional adults.
Come on.
So that EQ part we always talk about. We won't have
Yeah.
an episode where we won't talk about EQ, those
Yes.
qualitative processes, right,
Yes.
and
And for
elements.
people
So
wondering, EQ, that's emotional
yeah.
intelligence. Go
Emotional
ahead.
intelligence, which came out over 22 years ago.
Mhm.
I still remember the Time magazine article that my mom had in the living room that had EQ,
That's so funny.
the new revolution.
Mhm.
So really, it's our goal to create these things through governance. So in essence, governance is control,
Yeah.
it's access,
Yes.
and it's love.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
and I had to give credit to Dirk Young and Rick Pitcairn and Andrew Pitcairn over there
Mhm.
for their great work at St. Joe's University Family Business Center, which I used
Mhm.
to be the director of. And they run an incredible multifamily office
Mm.
for ultra high worth families.
Okay.
And so they've struggled with this, and they've bumped up against this for many generations with their
Mhm.
family. So
Mhm.
control is who has power to make
Yeah.
decisions. Okay, decisions individually or collective regarding the
Mhm.
family direction and the risk. Okay, who
Mhm.
who ha- who has that power in the decisions?
Give those
Access.
again,
Yep.
Brian. Give because I
Sure.
want people to write these down because
Yep.
these are very important questions
Yep.
to ask yourself, right, in real time, when things are quote unquote okay, because these are things that come up when things are not going okay.
That's right.
When there is illness in the family, when there is uncertainty, when there has been a transition, some people, I call it transition, other people call it death. So when these things happen, you are on certain clocks, meaning inheritance tax has to happen within a certain time frame. Death certificates have to happen within a certain
Very
time frame. Right?
technical. Very
Right,
technical.
there's all of those things. And so now starting to figure out in those moments to now all of a sudden go, who has power, who has control? It's like those are
Yep.
not the moments to start planning. And a lot of people start, as Brian used the word pathway, start this pathway then, but that becomes very chaotic and disruptive. I talked to somebody yesterday, I believe it was, and they were saying, oh, the day before, excuse me, and I was asking them about grieving, and they
Mhm.
were saying they hadn't had a chance to grieve yet because they were so busy taking care of family stuff
That's right.
around the loss.
That's
And
right.
so it becomes important to get these things again, hence the importance of a family office advisor,
Yep.
to make sure that you have these things
Yeah.
in order so
Yeah.
that when the inevitable happens, in the words of my mother, nobody gets out of here alive,
That's
right?
right.
So
Right. Yep.
when the inevitable is coming, make it smooth
Yep.
as possible for those people, because life after death for me is about the people who are still on this earth
Yep.
and how do they continue to have fullness of life after someone's transition.
Well, that's the part of love of governance, which I
Yes.
refer to Susie Orman, and a lot of advisors don't like her. I don't know why.
Hmm.
I take good information wherever it is, take
That's
the
right.
best and leave the rest.
Come on.
And so she always said the ultimate act of love is loving from the grave.
Mm.
And so
Hmm.
here at the end, I look up in the air because on my wall I had the emotional, how emotions can derail your finances, and it gives kind of a roller coaster of the stock market, you
Ooh.
know.
Hmm.
And it's optimism, excitement, thrill, euphoria, and then as it goes down, you have anxiety, denial, fear, panic, despondency, and then
Mm.
depression. And
Mm.
then it goes back up, and you have hope and relief, right? So
Right.
what's interesting about this is that if you overlay Kubler-Ross's stages of
Grief.
grief on
Hmm.
this,
Hmm.
which not many people have done work on. I've done extensive work on this,
Hmm.
and you have too, because
That's just where my mind went. Yep.
the program we came from.
Yes.
I did my master's thesis on grief and bereavement
Hmm.
in the family, and so the stages of loss: shock, denial, which
Hmm.
is disbelief,
Hmm.
anger,
Yep.
bargaining, and
Yep.
acceptance. Right.
Yep.
So that's important to know about this too. And so, as a trusted advisor, you may not have a background in bereavement, but you should have somebody in your network that you
Yes.
can pivot to, bring in for that
Come
specific.
on.
Because to your point, death and taxes, we're all going to bump into them. And we always talk about the 4 Ds, right? You have death, disability, disagreement, and I'll think about the other one in a
I gotta
second.
say, I was
Uh,
raised on four. I was raised on death, divorce,
Divorce is the other one. Yeah,
disability, and disease.
disagreement, disease, and
I didn't
disagreement.
have disagreement, but yeah, I
Yeah,
like it
in family businesses, you could see that's conflict resolution, right?
for
Or
sure. Yeah.
partnership dissolving, or suing each other or what have you. So
Hmm.
so in family businesses and families of wealth, after a liquidity event, you're going to run into those 4 Ds, right? Death,
Hmm.
divorce, disability, and disagreement.
Hmm.
And all of them run into denial.
Mm.
Okay, so that's just not a river in Egypt, as they say. So just to recap: control, access, and love. Access:
Hmm.
who has access to the money, and how is liquidity structured? Is it structured for growth, preservation, and who has control of that liquidity? Because as you get into multi-generation, you hear the knock on the door. Excuse me, where's my money?
Mm.
uh,
Honey.
so that's a real thing, and you want to be
Yes.
respectful. You want to be respectful and communicate the liquidity mandate and how people get paid and what's
Yeah.
the timeline, right?
Yeah.
And what's their equity, ownership, stock, vote.
Hmm.
Those all
Hmm.
mean the same thing.
Hmm.
Equity, ownership, stock, vote in that
Mhm.
process of the
Yeah.
decision making? Do they have a
Yeah.
vote in that process?
And
And
in lay people's term, do you have a voice or a say
that's it.
in this
Do you have
game?
stock in it?
Right?
I got
Do you
stock in
have
it. Yeah,
any?
that's right.
Right? Because there's
Yeah,
a lot of people who are gonna come with a whole bunch of talk and opinions, but
that's
when
right.
it comes down to it, they have no rights, they have no input that's going to make a decision in what needs to be done.
And unfortunately, we're in a society that wants us to not have ownership, but to rent everything. Everything from
Mm,
Uber to,
mhm,
Grubhub to,
mm,
it's all
mhm,
like on-demand rent
mhm,
versus
mm.
the hard work of and the pride,
Yes,
the healthy
yes,
pride of ownership and
yeah,
responsibility,
yeah.
right? And sacrifice, right?
Mhm,
So that's a big part of it. So that's a good segue to the last part, which is love, of
mhm,
the three parts of governance. And love is, how is love expressed? And I
yeah,
want to harp on that word express, because
mhm,
how's it expressed within the family? Do you communicate? Do you hug each other? Many families, children don't tell their parents they love them, and
yep,
parents don't tell their kids they love them.
yep,
During COVID, I remember turning to my wife. I said, "We're going to find a lot of parents that find out they don't like their kids."
right. I said the
And
same thing.
it was kind of joking, but it was kind of sad too.
Yep, yep,
So, how is love expressed within the family around communication and expectation around money and
mm,
love? Because as you and I know, and being many years of therapy and kind of our own personal self growth, that
mhm,
expectation and false expectation, right?
mhm,
False expectation is resentment under construction,
mm,
right?
mm.
So if
Give
you have
that
a
one
false,
again. Wait a minute, Brian. I gotta sit with that one. Resentment under construction. Give us a little bit about that.
so if you have a false expectation that your
Yes.
partner or your family member is going to act in a certain behavior or way,
Mhm,
or they're going to
mhm.
communicate, or they should have communicated something to you
Yeah.
without you verbalizing that expectation to them
Mhm.
in an open, transparent way,
Yes.
then resentment can start to build.
Yes.
Okay.
Leslie has asked for a tambourine on that one. Here, Les, I got you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Good.
Um, and I'm 100% Irish, second generation. You know, Sometimes we don't like talking about emotions and we stuff it
Mhm.
down, right? And
Mhm.
maybe we'll throw a couple Guinnesses on top of it, right?
Mhm.
And so that's resentment just
Mm.
stewing, if you will.
Mhm.
And if you don't get those out, if you don't have what they call a catalyst, or a way to get that information out in a healthy,
Yes.
productive way, and really, talk about the elephant in the room,
Well,
um, in a way that's respectful. So
that's a
that's why we
love
really
piece.
harp on the values exercise and the values project. With you and I have
Yes.
worked with families before and setting up their mission and their vision,
Mhm.
and really the family creed, if you will,
Yes.
exploring that narrative of the family and
Yes.
what is the secret sauce of the resilience of the success of why you
That's
ended
right.
up with the wealth. And
That's
in
right.
doing that, you're addressing entitlement,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
All through communication,
Yeah.
and communicate. You can never over communicate,
Yeah.
and that's the key.
I love that. I remember a long time ago, a friend said to me, he said, "It's okay to tell the truth." He said, "Just remember to tell the truth with love."
There you go. Yeah.
And so that slowed down my communication. And he wasn't saying it because I was cutting people
Yeah.
with my words. And I mean,
Yeah.
I'm capable, but that's not, it was just like an insightful moment. And so I really took that and sat with that. And when I was led to speak with people about certain things, I had to ask myself, is this the most loving way that I
Mhm.
can say it right
Mhm.
now?
Yeah.
And so the right now became important because depending on what was on my mind and my heart, how I was feeling, sometimes it meant that I needed to shift. I needed to
Mhm.
postpone the
Absolutely.
conversation to a better time. The other person may not have been in a receptive space.
Yeah.
And so we needed to do that. So the love is making sure it's reciprocal
Yeah.
and having these conversations. I love communication around expectation, because you can expect something or want something from me that I don't want for myself.
Mhm.
And so then it leads to disappointment,
There's a challenge there.
resentment,
Yeah.
Right. And that's why I
Challenge.
wanted you to break down this,
Yeah.
this false expectation leading to resentment
I love
and
that.
destruction.
And I love what you just said of how you wrap it, right? It's like,
Hmm.
how do you, and, in sports, they talk about the sandwich. Make
Yeah.
a positive comment of what you did well, tell them
Hmm.
about what they can improve, and then give them another positive, make a
Hmm.
sandwich out of it.
Hmm.
And really, that's coming out of what in the 70s, you might remember this, the transactional analysis,
Yep.
which is really what big data calls meet them where they are,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So an example of that would be if I'm coming in from work, and I have the deal of the century on my mind, and my young child comes and meets me, and they want to play. I'm at an adult level, they're at a child level, right? So we're
Yes.
missing each other. And
Yes.
so I could yell at them, or I could get aggravated, or
Hmm.
we're just not matching. And transactional analysis is really, they talk about the child, adolescent, and the adult.
Hmm.
And it's and for couples, can they get out of being adult and go and have fun together and
That's
play like
right.
little kids or
That's right.
teenagers
That's right.
on a weekend?
Yes.
So part of our job too is to help create these space.
Yes.
That's why family retreats are so important
Hmm.
around governance and around family
Hmm.
offices, is to take you out of your physical environment
Yes.
so that you shed some of that. My wife often talks about the Jersey Shore, and as you drive down the Jersey Shore, all the cares, she says, and worries just shed off of her. And then the
Hmm.
final transformation is going over the Sea Isle Bridge, and she
Hmm.
could smell the salt air and roll down the windows. And the experience, it's incredible. That's what we're
Hmm.
talking about, is creating that space
Yes.
so that we can have the connection on the same transactional analysis on the
Hmm.
same level.
Hmm.
Okay. And then you're in the environment of that love,
Yeah.
right? You're in a higher probability of success.
Hmm. Hmm. So now tell me this, Brian. So people are listening to this and some are nodding and they're saying, yes, this makes sense.
Yeah,
Then it becomes, well, how do I do this?
absolutely.
What is my next step?
Great. Yeah. So the kind of technical steps of working as a financial advisor who has a specialty in family office work, or family wealth services, as I call them, is to really have somebody to address those qualitative issues.
Hmm.
So you and I know we're really big on financial DNA,
Hmm.
understanding the individual, doing a lot of assessments on the individual personalities so we can make those matches, right?
Yeah.
So that
And for
we,
people who are joining
yeah,
us for the first time, you
yeah,
can watch some of the past shows on my
yeah,
Ask Dr. Walls 525 page where Brian and I talk about family finance. There's a link in the write up about how to do your, financial DNA.
yeah,
So check out, there's also some links for like Knotbox to make sure we're
yeah.
putting things in order for family and loved ones. Go ahead.
That's great. And so really that's around the big 5 personalities, right? And
Hmm.
I'm not gonna put you on the spot, but, extrovert, introvert, openness, consciousness, neuroticism, all these things about what is the personality. So we wanna get a good assessment of the individual.
Yes.
Then we also wanna benchmark the family as to where they are in
Hmm.
communication and togetherness in
Hmm.
their value set. Once we have that assessment, we can benchmark to successful families. They're
Hmm.
interested in that feedback, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And then we can create a plan with the family to do that qualitative emotional work and build their mission, their values, and goal setting.
Hmm.
And then you get into governance and really talk about policies around of asset allocation, capital distributions, liquidity, as we talked about, risk
Hmm.
management. What
Hmm.
happens if you do lose a family member? Like, what are the
Yeah.
backup plans, right? So, governance and ethical policies. How do we
Yes.
act within the family structure? What
Yes.
is our expectation? Are we expected to come to the family retreat every year, come hell or
Mhm.
high water?
Mhm.
What are the acceptable excuses? So these things need
Mhm.
to be codified and written down.
Yeah.
And as you and I know, when you write something out, you codify it and you put a stamp on it, and you have an
Yep.
agreement,
Yep.
then that sets the bar, which is
Mhm.
expectation. When it's communicated properly, people meet expectations. You
Yes.
and I know that.
Yes.
So really, it's also, the first thing most family office providers start with investment expertise, asset
Mhm.
allocation. They go right into financial stuff.
Well, let me back you up one more
Yeah.
step. How does someone even find one? Is this
Um,
a Google search? Is this something where they go into the bank and ask? How
no,
do they call you? What do
yeah.
they do?
I'm available, Brian at thebrogangroup.com. You're available
Mhm.
for a complimentary consultation
Mhm.
to direct them in the right place. And it's
Mhm.
really a question of, are they ready for a family office, or are they really just in the beginning stages to start to set up a holding company,
Mhm.
or to start to build the silos that kind of branch off the family business, the family
Mhm.
enterprise.
Mhm.
And traditionally, it's usually around real estate. It's around being the quarterback to their financial advisor, to their accountant,
Mhm.
and to their tax strategies, right? So it's about coordinating the team and finding the right person. So it is kind of a subspecialty. So you had to do some homework.
Mhm.
Um, but these providers, they usually start with, they go, in my opinion, they go heavy right into the investments, right?
Mhm.
I think that's a trap right there. Okay.
Yeah.
You and I, and the work that I've done traditionally starts with the emotional expertise.
Yeah.
So we blend that investment expertise with the behavioral finance, with
Mhm.
the behavioral coaching and these
Mhm.
assessment tools on the qualitative side, right?
Mhm.
I'm
Mhm.
I'm just as skilled as anybody on the investment side. And in fact, my family business runs a independent research shop that provides research to institutional money managers. So
Yeah.
that part is taken care of. That's almost commoditized at a certain point now.
Yeah.
Now we're really talking about illiquid direct deals, hedge funds, alternatives, which are a little bit more specific.
Mhm.
But when you build the center around risk mitigation, which is this qualitative behavioral coaching part, okay?
Mhm.
Because I'm here to tell you, you could go heavy into the technical part of setting up a state, funding the trust, doing the investments. But if you don't address those family dynamics,
Yes.
they act as a saboteur to all that good work.
Mhm.
So I
Mhm.
believe, and I will hold this a core belief, and it's been my experience that it's more successful as an outcome to approach it this way, is to build a center around risk mitigation.
Mm.
Okay.
Mhm.
And so it's interesting that, what does that mean? Well, it's about addressing the unknown, the black
Mhm.
swan. And
Mhm.
I'm not saying I'm a swami, okay? But I'm here to tell you that it's been my experience as a professional that I've been on the record calling the crisis in 2008, the housing crisis. Okay.
Mhm.
I was able to see and foresee the COVID crisis, and this is
Mhm.
all documented. Okay.
Mhm.
And it's because of our background collectively of really seeing trauma and risk and reading the tea leaves that way,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
The unknown. And
Yeah.
behavioral finance, which I specialize in, is really a key. The core of behavioral finance is risk mitigation.
Right. Right.
So the old saying, you only have to get wealthy once. It's
Mhm.
about preservation of that wealth and
Come
that
on.
capital, and
Yeah.
growing it in a very, very prudent and low risk
Yeah.
manner.
Yeah.
So the key to that, how am I able to see these things in the future? Well, you pay attention, quite honestly,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
you are a generalist. I'm just really lucky. God's blessed me to have that generalist perspective. And
Mhm.
and you and I know there's two rules of psychology. If you're rigid and specialized, rigidity breaks.
Yep.
If you're flexible and general, you can move with the wind.
Yeah.
So as a generalist, I can really see how, um, you know, short interest, margin loans,
Mhm.
leverage, debt,
Mhm.
how these all currencies, cryptocurrencies,
Mhm.
political and legislative laws, how they affect
How they impact.
money,
Yeah.
families, and
Yeah.
taxes, and domestic and international rules. So that flexibility and structure for risk, positioning your family for a great, it really positions your family for a greater probability of
It
success.
does. It does. You know, as you were just saying it, I'm thinking, right, there's so many terms that if you're not sitting around a dining room table, a breakfast table, having meals together, if you're not purposely setting up family meetings to have these types of discussions, you're left to hopefully learn this stuff.
Sure.
And right, it's
And hope's not a good strategy.
hope is, let me tell you, hope is not a good strategy at
No, no.
all. And then being able to find trusted sources.
Yeah.
So which is why I have you come on, which is why I've had Professor Tanya Evans come on. I talk about her book, Digital Money Demystified,
Yep.
right? That's a major
Cryptocurrency.
one
It's a big
because
part
this
of
is
asset
the
allocation.
it's a big
Yep.
part of where we are right now. So we can't ignore where
First
we
life nature.
are,
Yep.
right? And we have to look at what are these thoughts that we're personally holding about this, because um, what are thoughts that are ours
Hmm.
and what are thoughts that have been passed down. And I
That's right.
know in previous conversations we've talked about people saying money is the root of all evil, and so then therefore it's like hands off, I don't want any of that. And then
It's a
you
false
came,
belief.
it's
Yep.
a false belief, and
Yep.
then you come on and drop the right, money goes to where it's treated the best.
Yep.
And it's like, okay, well, that's a different mindset, right? So now it's asking me to look at my relationship with money,
Yep.
right? What's my honest relationship with it? Where does it need to grow, change, adjust, evolve, as you're talking about
Yep.
flexibility? And what am I looking at as far as passing my wealth, which we identify as being invisible,
Yep.
knowledge on? What am I saying about being rich, which is more my showy outward, this is what
Yep.
I have
That's right.
behavior?
Yep.
And what am I modeling to
Yes.
people? And then
Absolutely.
what are they learning from
Yeah.
my life as I manage this thing called money?
I love that we just said, I won't allow my kids to use the word rich.
Mm-hmm.
I
Do
won't.
tell.
Because if somebody's rich or they look rich, that's just it. It's a optic. You're seeing
Mm-hmm.
it just from the outside, the surface, and we don't know what's going on in the four walls of their
Come
house.
on.
We don't know if they have a trust fund. We don't know if that trust fund has liquidity gates that they can only get $50,000 a year.
Come
We
on.
don't we don't know if they have more money than the Gettys. And
Yes.
guess what? They're just normal human beings with no issues whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's really about creating, and richness is about the experience of life, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's sucking the marrow out of life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so richness,
Mm-hmm.
you have a very rich vacation. It was filled with joy and happiness and love and emotions, and
Mm-hmm.
it was a rich experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the context, but not around wealth, because not around money, because wealth is really, to your point, money goes to where it's treated the best.
Mm-hmm.
It's energy. It goes to where who's the most responsible,
Mm-hmm.
who's the most emotionally mature and financially mature,
Mm.
and that's a spectrum, and
And we call that
that's a journey.
stewardship, right?
Yeah, that's stewardship. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and so just like you, we have some incredible national parks, and that's the analogy I use when I teach this to
Mm-hmm.
young inheritors and the next generation. We talk about stewardship and the responsibility of wealth and the
Mm-hmm.
privilege and also the blessing of it.
Mm-hmm.
So that stewardship is really okay, being a holder
Yeah.
of it,
Yeah.
being a housekeeper of it.
Yeah.
When you're a beekeeper, you facilitate, and you are a practitioner of nurturing the hive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and the
Yes.
same thing with wealth. You nurture it. You attend to the hive. You
Mm-hmm.
tend to the wealth,
Mm-hmm.
and you're a steward. And guess what? You are a renter of it, because you're just going to pass it along. You're
Come
going to get
on.
the benefits of it in your lifetime. And if you do it the right way, it will be greater for the next generation,
Come on.
so that you can pass that on.
I think
Um,
people need to sit with that one for a moment,
yeah,
Brian, right? Because they tell you like you can't take things with you. And
that's
it
right.
and if you do not set your stuff up, even if you don't have any children,
Yep.
I am a person who does not have children, but I have a lot of quote unquote social family. Not a lot, but I
Absolutely.
have
Yeah.
social family, right? Who I love, who will be here should we go the natural trajectory, right?
Hmm.
Will be here after I'm gone.
Hmm.
So it's not for me. It's not about me spending up everything like, well,
Hmm.
here we go. That's it.
Yep.
Right. No, it is about me having these rich experiences, right? Because I do want to experience the fullness of life, whatever
Yep.
that is for me.
Yep.
But I also want wealth so that it continues beyond my existence, so
Yeah.
that others can. My god granddaughter, she said to me, she's like, I would like to have that experience. When she hears certain stories, she's like, I
Yeah.
want to have that experience. And
Yep.
there are things. And, so we do look at social media. We grew up on lifestyles of the rich and famous,
That's right.
where, right, we see that there are experiences beyond Philadelphia.
Sure.
And so it's like, okay, what does that look like for us? And what is the work ethic that we need to put in place in order to generate the wealth, right?
Yes.
The
Yes.
behind the scenes
Yeah.
motor, generate the wealth to create the rich life experiences,
That's right.
whatever they are per
That's
person.
exactly right. And it follows your passions. So to your point, working with a family office advisor, a trusted advisor, I'll get into a little bit more of the technicals of the day to day.
Yeah.
But again, charitable giving, philanthropic endeavors, you're following your passions is an incredible, what I call a cohesion or glue for the family to
Mm-hmm.
bring people together. And for you, not having heirs, but having a great, incredible network and
Mm-hmm.
passions that, and charitable passions that you
Yeah.
have worked your whole life
Mm-hmm.
around animal care and
Mm-hmm.
around community.
Mm-hmm.
These are incredible things.
You act like you
Spiritual
know me.
awareness,
You act like you know
kind
me a
of.
little bit. Look.
So I mean, some of the services just to round it out. Some of them get very minute and talk about paying people's bills.
Yes.
So that's a great service. I would love someone to come in and pay my bills
Right.
because it's a taxing thing that I do every Saturday morning.
Mhm.
But I always pay my bills after pancakes because everything's good after pancakes. Okay, just a little note. Um, and
Y'all
imagine
write that down. Everything's good after if you leave
my
with
wife,
one
my
thing
wife, my
today.
wife and I, we have our couples meeting, financial money date after pancakes because
I love it.
yeah, when the endorphins and carbohydrates are kicking, the dopamine is good.
Yes. Brian, I'm
So
gonna give that to you as your book title, just so you know.
that's
Everything's good
excellent.
after pancakes.
That's
Go
it. I
ahead.
love it. Not your, from a minute on the lips, forever on the hips, as
There we
Grandma
go.
Phil Hammer said.
Yes.
Managing your cash flow, providing the data about the assets, real time kind of mark to market, if you will.
Mhm.
Investment management, understanding your mandates for the different vehicles that you might have.
Mhm.
Administrative work, as we talked about, paying the bills. Philanthropic intentions,
Mhm.
um, and really now that families are spread out geographically, it's
Yeah.
about getting individual kind of information
Mhm.
in their own kind of personalized balance sheet, if you will.
Yes.
And we're talking about accounting, K1s, alternative
Mhm.
investments, tax strategies, and
Yes.
really geographically, that's people can log in on Zoom and have a family meeting, which is great.
Mhm.
Um, and
True.
so I love that I harped on how addressing that emotional and that qualitative part is key because
Yeah.
really the day to day is it's pretty set in stone as to and scalable for most services, and there's software out there that are aggregators for family
Mhm.
that you can leverage technology
Yes.
because we're really talking about real estate. You're talking about the operating business sometimes of a
Mhm.
family business. You're
Mhm.
talking about commodities. You're talking about private equity, hedge funds, MLPs, which are master limited partnerships.
Mhm.
And then now we're talking about AI,
Yes.
right? So
Yes.
AI is a big part of this. And how do we leverage that so that we can address it? Because
Mhm.
it is a risk first, then it is
Mhm.
a benefit. You can't see it as a benefit first and then a risk. It's really a
Yes.
risk first,
Yeah.
and then how it can be leveraged to help um, your situation. So
Help you along your path. You use the word pathway a lot
yeah,
today, and I think that's important for people to understand that this is not a one and done thing, right? You don't take
yeah,
one step and you're at your destination.
it's a wealth journey.
It is a wealth. Thank you. I
Yeah,
love it. It
it's
is
a
a
wealth journey.
wealth journey. And so there are markers along the way. So just like in any journey you take, there's certain landmarks, there's certain signs that you
Yeah.
look for to lead you in the proper direction.
And those are the benchmarks,
Yes,
absolutely. And
exactly.
I steal that from Rattle and Hum with U2, a great
Mhm,
Irish band. It's a
mhm.
musical journey, he said. It's a
Okay.
musical journey. So, this process of family wealth services is it's a family journey and it's a wealth journey.
Yeah,
It's a family and multi-generational wealth story.
definitely, definitely. I want to put up here, Professor Tanya Evans put decentralized AI will be huge. The
Oh my gosh.
intersection of blockchain plus
Yeah.
tech plus AI.
And
Yeah,
cryptocurrency.
yeah.
So, I think, listen, I still believe we live in one of the greatest nations in the world.
Mhm.
And I just want to wish everybody a happy 4th of July.
Yes.
And boy, we have a lot of challenges in our nation, but
Mhm.
if we continue to have great conversations like this
Yeah.
of how do we strengthen the family,
Yes.
And how do we open communication in an honest, transparent, cohesive way?
Come on.
I'm hopeful. I'm
Come
very
on.
hopeful. I'm very
Yeah.
bullish. Very
Yeah.
bullish.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's about, it's about consideration,
Yeah.
right? If I'm looking at you and I'm saying, and I want you to grow just like you want me to grow,
Yeah.
then I'm going to make sure that we grow together.
That's
It's
it.
not about you having access and you keeping me from access or vice versa.
Yeah.
So,
It's
I
the
always
ultimate
say
compliment.
it
It's the
is.
ultimate compliment.
And I
Yeah.
always say with our network, we got to make sure our net works. Otherwise, it's just a hole.
That's it. Well, God bless you.
And on that note, everybody go eat some pancakes. Because why,
That's it.
Brian?
That's it. Everything's good after pancakes.
All
Thank you,
right,
Dr.
y'all.
Kathy. Truly
Thank
appreciate it.
you. Have a great day, everyone. Be
Take
well.
care now. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.